Hello and welcome to our webinar, What's New in ForeFlight from 2024. Today we will explore the advancements we've introduced to ForeFlight Dispatch and ForeFlight Mobile over the past year. Let's meet today's presenters. Guys, introduce yourselves.
Thanks, Keith. I'm Simpson Bennett. I'm the product marketing manager here at ForeFlight that focuses on business aviation. I've been in aviation for about 10 years, have a past predominantly in the avionics side, but have made a transition over to the ForeFlight team. So very excited to be here and part of the team. I live here in Melbourne, Florida, and excited for this webinar today.
Thanks, Keith. Super excited to be able to talk to everybody about some of the fantastic features that we released for business aviation here in 2024. I'm Alex Montgomery. I'm the Director of Product for Business Aviation at ForeFlight, based in Houston, Texas. I've been with ForeFlight for a little over 8 years and have been a pilot for almost 10 years. I'm a commercial instrument-rated pilot here in the Houston area. My wife and I own a Mooney that we love to take on some awesome cross-country adventures. Before ForeFlight, my background was in product management, working for a variety of different software applications, and I can't wait to show you some of the exciting features that we have for you in store on this webinar today.
And my name is Keith Wagner, and I am on the ForeFlight marketing team based in Seattle, Washington. Before we begin, I want to mention that you can ask questions using the Q&A panel and the chat function. We have a team standing by to answer your questions, and we will also take a few of the more popular questions that come in and ask them to our presenters at the end of the webinar. We tend to get a lot of questions towards the end, so if you have a question, I encourage you to submit it as soon as you think of it. If your question is not answered during today's webinar, you can always send it to us at team@foreflight.com. Lastly, today's webinar is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel and website.
All right, let's get started. So the first up, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the new features in ForeFlight Mobile, starting with graphical weight and balance available for our business performance subscribers. So the first thing that we need to do with graphical weight and balance is to configure it, which will be configured by administrators for published aircraft inside of ForeFlight Web. So here I have a Phenom 300 aircraft inside of ForeFlight Web that's already has its weight and balance information configured, as well as a couple of different other performance profile changes made. Scrolling down inside of this aircraft configuration, I'll see that I already have a weight and balance profile added from ForeFlight standard configuration template. My first step is I'm going to be clicking the edit button on the right-hand side to pull up that weight and balance profile. And you'll notice right away that we have this new aircraft interior section on the right-hand side. If I click that enable button right underneath that little modal, it's going to turn on graphical weight and balance. And you'll notice right away that after I've done that, it's automatically configured the layout of the graphical depiction of the aircraft based off of the stations that I already have in. This makes it super easy to get started and start using graphical weight and balance. So from here, I can see, does the configuration and layout of the graphical depiction match the actual aircraft that I'm flying? So in this case, let's say that it's pretty close, but there's one seat that I've got facing the wrong direction, this seat over here at the bottom. So let's change that. If I click on that seat, I'm going to right away get several options where I can move that seat around and configure it a little bit differently. In this case, we want to rotate it around so that it is facing aft of the cabin instead of facing forward. To do that, I'm going to click this rotation icon at the top hand corner. And by rotating that, clicking that button twice, boom, all of a sudden the seat is now facing the right direction. Once you're happy with the configuration, you can use this enable on mobile slider here at the top to be able to turn on graphical weight and balance for this particular aircraft and this particular weight and balance profile for all of the crew and users on your organization. Once I turn that on, the last step is to hit the save button at the bottom, and now I have my weight and balance fully configured and ready to use in ForeFlight Mobile. Hopping over to ForeFlight Mobile, this feature is only available inside of the flight's weight and balance view. It is not available currently if you go to the More Weight and Balance tab. So inside of a flight, I have a flight here from Redmond to Houston with that Phenom 300 aircraft that we just configured inside of ForeFlight Web. If I scroll down to the payload section and tap this weight and balance button right here, I'll now see the graphical depiction that I just configured automatically loaded with the weights that I'd already set up in the payload section of the flight. But let's say that we need to make a change. Let's say that this 196-pound weight on the right-hand side seat is actually going to be a little bit lower. To change that, I can still change that in the table on the right-hand side, but it's now even easier with the graphical depiction. I can tap on that seat, and then I will get the ability to change the load of that seat, to mark whether it's an infant in the lap, or to use a standard weight. I can type that weight in by using the number pad at the top, or I can choose a standard weight, such as the female standard weight of 184 pounds, by just selecting that from the dropdown. Let's do that. Once I have that selected, it'll automatically update to 184 pounds on the right-hand side in the graphical depiction, as well as in the table on the right-hand side. But let's say that I also want to move the passenger that's currently sitting in that top left-hand seat to one of the rearward seats to better match the way that they're actually going to be loaded into the aircraft. I can also do this graphically. I can tap on that left-hand side seat here, the 196 pounds, and when I do that, I'm going to get that same option I had before, except this time I'm going to click clear on the top right-hand side. When I do that, it's going to zero the weight out. And then if I click close, now that weight is out of that seat, and I can put that weight in a different seat that better matches how the aircraft is actually being loaded. In this case, let's do it facing the other seat that we currently have our female passenger in. Tapping on that seat, I can then go in here and I can either type in the actual weight, or just like before, I can go down to a standard weight, tap on that standard weight, and now I have successfully moved that passenger from that top left-hand seat to the middle row on the right-hand side. You'll notice as I've done this, I'm now seeing the graphical depiction of my changes, as well as the table on the right-hand side has automatically been updated with those changes. If I go back to my flight, all of the changes I just made have come back over into the payload section so that you have not only the correct payload, but as well as the correct performance numbers with that additional weight. At any time, I can make a change to the weight and balance by tapping that weight and balance section where it currently says imbalance, either graphically adding or removing passengers or making cargo changes as I need. And that is graphical weight and balance in ForeFlight Mobile. Next up, let's talk a little bit about AI airport comments. This is a feature that's available in all plans of ForeFlight. If we go back to our flight, Redmond to Houston, and then zooming in a little bit, go to Houston. If I tap on the comments button on the right-hand side, I'm now going to be presented with this AI-based summary of all of the different comments that have been submitted to ForeFlight about operating at the Houston airport. This is a really helpful, quick way to get an understanding of what other pilots' experiences have been at Houston Hobby. If I tap on another airport, let's say Sugar Land in this case, I can quickly compare and see what another airport in the area's experiences have been using that AI summary. Once again, I can tap on the comments button on the right-hand side, and then I'll get that AI-generated summary from other pilots about what it's like arriving and operating at Sugar Land Airport. One other way to being able to get to this is via the Airports tab. So if I tap on Airports at the bottom, I'm once again presented with a list of airports. This could be from your flight, this could be recent airports you've operated at, or your favorite airports. If I tap on that comments button on Hobby in this case, it's going to bring up a bigger display and a modal that has that same AI summary at the top. Continuing on, we have another exciting feature to announce, reported turbulence. Powered by Sentry devices automatically being reported to our network, this provides enhanced situational awareness on where the smooth rides are and where the bumpy rides are, not relying on PIREPs or forecasted weather. Let me show you how it works. Let's go back to our flight. Here we are, Redmond to Houston, and I'm going to use the layer selector in the top left-hand corner to select the reported turbulence layer. When I do that, you'll notice all of a sudden we have these clustered dots showing, and each one of these dots is a ride report that has been reported by Sentry. So you can see here we've got a little bit of turbulence reported over Salt Lake, some turbulence and some smooth air reported over Denver, as well as a lot of smooth air reported over Phoenix, all called out with these helpful ride reports. On the right-hand side, you have an altitude slider, which will control what the reports you're seeing based off of the altitude that that report was made at. Right now, we're seeing reports around 7,000 feet. If we were to increase it to 360 or 230 or another altitude, it would automatically filter the reports that are being received to ones that are near that altitude. Zooming in a little bit to Salt Lake City, we can now tap on any one of these reports and we'll be able to get more information about the type of turbulence that was encountered in that report, what type of aircraft encountered that turbulence, as well as when it was last recorded. Another fantastic aspect of this feature is that in addition to providing bumpy air or turbulent reports, it's also providing smooth air reports. That's where you see these gray buttons up on the top. This is such a powerful aspect of this feature, as usually most other solutions are only showing you where bumpy air is. They're not highlighting where the smooth air is. If we go back to tapping on one of those reports, you'll see on the right-hand side exactly the breakdown of what those reports look like. If you tap into one of the reports, such as tapping into this light to moderate at 7,300 feet, we can get a little bit more detail about that report, such as the aircraft type it was reported, what their weight category was, or their airspeed when they encountered that turbulence. This is also available for business performance users inside of the Profile View tab. To access that, we're going to tap the flight plan drawer, tap on Profile on the right-hand side, and then inside of our 2D dimensional profile view, we will get those same ride reports, both smooth and turbulent air. To access this, all we'll need to do is tap on that layer selector and ensure that reported turbulence layer is enabled. A few quick things to know about reported turbulence. Like I mentioned earlier, they are Sentry powered and automatic. So we have a proprietary algorithm that is taking variations in Sentry accelerometer data and determining what type of turbulence was automatically encountered by that aircraft at that time, and then feeding that information back over our network to make it so that other users, such as yourself, can get insight into what real pilots and real aircraft are encountering in flight. But turbulence reports are only sent once the device has reconnected to the internet, and so they might be post-flight. If you're running a Sentry in an aircraft that does not have data link or onboard internet, then it's going to be transmitted once the plane is back on the ground and that iPad or iPhone has been reconnected to the internet. So there may be a little bit of delay in the turbulence reporting. It is included in pack for offline use. So if you're wondering how can I use this in flight, make sure to pack before the flight, and any reported turbulence that was available at that time of packing will be included for viewing in the cockpit in flight. It's also automatically filtered out based on age. So as the ride reports get older and get less relevant, we automatically declutter and start removing them both from the map and from profile view. And like I mentioned earlier, it displays smooth ride reports in addition to turbulence reports so that you can find that smooth air that we're all looking for. Let's talk a little bit about services. This year, we're excited to announce that we have trip support powered by Jeppesen inside of ForeFlight. And this can be displayed directly inside of ForeFlight Mobile in our new services tab. Going back to our flight, if I tap that right-hand more menu, I'll now see this services tab if I have already requested services from ForeFlight Trip Support and I'm working with a trip planner. Inside of this services tab, I'm going to see a list of all of the trips that I have planned, such as this one, with the trip number that's associated with that flight. If I tap into a specific trip, in this case, I'm going to tap into this one on the left-hand side. On the right, I can see information about the crew that's going to be operating that flight, what aircraft it is, as well as the passengers on that right-hand side. Tapping into the flight will give me more information about each individual leg of the flight on the left-hand side, as well as what services have been arranged for that flight and the status of those services, all updated by the trip planner that you're working with. So for example, if we dive into the Gen Deck or the general declarations, I can then there see, okay, what has been arranged for what airports and are they ready to go? Is everything set so that when I execute this flight, I can have confidence that my customs information is taken care of? In this case, yes, green confirmed, Jeppesen ITPS has you covered. Going back, I can choose this with another aircraft. I can go back to the services tab. I can scroll down a little bit and I can see what still remains in progress or what hasn't been confirmed yet. In this case, my overflight permits. Tapping on overflights, I'll get more information about where those overflight permits are at. So Iceland, USA, already confirmed, ready to go, along with the confirmation numbers. The Denmark one, though, is still in progress. I can check this later, and it will dynamically update based off of the current status from my Jeppesen trip planner. Let's talk a little bit about what's new in Runway Analysis, starting with a landing factor selector, which is available for all aircraft running Runway Analysis. Let's go back to our flight. If I tap on the landing part, I'm running my landing runway analysis calculations for Houston, I'm going to be brought to our landing runway analysis screen. In this case, I have already selected a arriving runway, so 3-1 left in this stage. But if you hadn't, that's always step one. Select which runway you're going to be landing on or expect to land on. And ForeFlight, of course, makes this easy by automatically pulling in the wind component of that runway. But you'll notice here on the bottom, we have this new landing factor selection, as well as with this badge, whether it was in flight or calculated in some other fashion. If we tap on that, we're going to be in new landing factor selector. The very first part of this is you can now specify which phase of flight you are calculating your landing factor. So that way, for regulatory reasons, you can still say, hey, we calculated our landing distance before the flight, but if you need to change it in flight, or if you need to use the actual OEM condition codes, you can now switch over to in flight and have both records for your runway analysis. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and say we're pre-flight, we're planning this flight, let's change the surface condition and see what happens. So we're going to go down here to the surface condition, scroll down a little bit more, and we'll get to see the landing distance factors that we have here for the Phenom 300. If I change from dry to dry factored, we'll automatically see the weights and the factored landing distance update going up to 4,676 feet expected. But let's say that we're in flight. Let's say we're flying the aircraft. We already have our pre-flight calculations complete, and we're getting some reports that the actual runway condition is a little bit different than we expected before we left the ground. So now I can go to this right-hand in-flight selector for phase of flight, select that, change from the actual surface to the condition code, and then I can see all of the condition codes coming from the OEM data. In this case, I could select runway condition code 6, and I can see that distance change, decrease a little bit to 4,008 feet. I can also change it to runway condition code 2. And in that case, I'm not only going to see the distance increase dramatically, but ForeFlight automatically tells me that I am exceeding the runway landing distance available. So this is another way that runway analysis is a powerful situational awareness tool, is that in addition to being able to allow you to configure the airplane exactly how you're flying it and get the best answers available, is that we will call out when either information doesn't necessarily make sense and you should reconsider it, as well as when you are exceeding the capabilities of the aircraft like we have here. So if I go back and I deselect that runway condition code 2, I can go back to the actual surface, for example, and then you'll notice it brought in that dry factored selection that we had before. When I did that, we get this helpful warning where conditions really don't make sense, such as using a dry factored surface condition with a 1.15 landing factor. This is another way that ForeFlight has your back and is automatically trying to make sure that just the wrong thing that you tapped on or something that doesn't really make sense is being called to the forefront of your mind. This feature is not only available inside of ForeFlight Mobile. For Dispatch subscribers, it's also available inside of Dispatch. Hopping over to Dispatch, we have that same flight. If we tap that runway analysis tab on the top and then go into the landing section, we'll see here underneath the configuration, we'll have those same surface conditions and landing factors available to us. So if I tap in the surface condition, I can change that to dry factor, dry. It's automatically synced over the dry factor that I put in before. And I can do the same with landing factors, such as changing it from 1.0 to increasing by 15% to 1.15, or whatever change that I would like to make. So this is available both inside of ForeFlight Mobile and for Dispatch subscribers, available inside of Dispatch, syncing down to the flight and the crew when the flight is released. The next feature of runway analysis I'd like to highlight is the tolled card. So now that we've completed our runway analysis calculations for our flight from Redmond to Houston, if I tap on landing to get back into runway analysis, I now have the ability to tap on tolled in that top right-hand corner next to the summary. When I do this, it's going to generate a tolled card that has a condensed, graphically easy to follow depiction of all of the calculations that have already been made, starting with our departure airport, Redmond Roberts Field, and ending with our arriving airport, William Hobby, runway 31 left. I can click that button in the top right-hand corner to choose what to do with this report, such as saving it to the flight files, marking it up, or printing it to have a paper copy with me on the flight, perhaps in a kneeboard. Last, let's highlight some of the new models that we've added in 2024. For the sake of time, I'm not going to read all of these out. I encourage you to take a screenshot of this picture, but we have added support for multiple models in 2024, which makes our runway analysis available for the vast majority of business aviation jets on the market. Let's talk a little bit about what's new in dispatch, starting with saved alternate routes. This does require a business performance and dispatch subscription for the aircraft being used. So on Dispatch Flights tab, I'm going to click on Tools on the right-hand side. And then you'll notice that we rearranged the graphical layout of this view just a little bit. Instead of having the navigation be at the top, we now have the navigation on the left-hand side to make it a little bit easier to find what tool you need and what you need to change. If I go into the Saved Routes section underneath Tools, I can then see all of the saved routes that I have created and are being used at my company. If I click on New Route, I will be displayed this beautiful graphical map-based depiction of the new route modal. And this is another new feature. Previously, we did not have this map depiction on the right-hand side. So now, as you're creating a primary route, or in this case, an alternate route, you'll be able to see what that route looks like in a graphical depiction, as well as what FERS that route is crossing. To create a saved alternate route, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to this designation field on the left-hand side, select alternate, and then we're going to put in a name for our route. In this case, I'm going to put alternate to Austin, our standard alternate procedure if we have to divert from Houston to go back to Austin. I'm going to select my primary destination as Houston, and I'm going to select my alternate destination as Austin, as well as the flight level that I expect, in this case, 220. I will put in the actual route that I want to save, that I want to be used anytime we're flying a flight to Houston with an alternate of Austin. I'll get that graphical layout on the right-hand side. And then when I'm ready, I can click Save to save that route. One other call out here is you'll notice the map on the right-hand side is using Jeppesen's chart. So this is the Jeppesen en route IFR chart. So if you do have dispatch, you'll be able to automatically get the best-in-class mapping technology and the best-in-class data available to you. Once I've saved that route, I can now see it's automatically been added to my saved routes. And if we go back to that flight by tapping Flights at the top hand, going to Edit for our flight from Redmond to Houston, and then we go to alternate routing, if I change it from direct to manual, and then tap on alternate route, I will now be able to see the saved alternate route I just created, along with the route, the altitude, and the name for the route. Once I click that, it will automatically pull that alternate route in, making flight planning one step more seamless and keeping everybody in sync on what the preferred routes really are. Dispatcher comments on saving was a popular feature request about how to keep your flight department in sync as different dispatchers or different pilots are touching the same flight. Let me show you how it works. Going back to our flight, let's say we finished making our changes to this flight, including adding in the alternate route that we just pulled from our saved alternate route. Now, if I go to the Save button on the right-hand side, and instead of just clicking Save, I click this up arrow, I'll have this new option to save with comment. When I click that, I'm going to get a free-form text entry where I, as a dispatcher or as a pilot, can add a note about the type of change that I made. In this case, we added our standard company alternate routing to Austin. If I check this always show on save, that will make it so that the next time I save a flight, instead of having to click that up arrow and add in save with comment, the comment box will always display. So that's an option for you based off of if you always want to make sure that there is a record of the changes being made with the reason those changes were made, or if you're okay, maybe you're self-dispatching and you just want to save the change without having to add that record. In this case, I'm going to check that box to make sure that there's always a record of what changes were made and why they were made. Once I do that and click Save, that flight will now have been saved with that comment. Anybody who is accessing this flight in the future will be able to view that comment by going into the history. If you tap that View History right by last change on the bottom, you'll be shown a depiction of all of the changes this flight history has had. And then if I click on details on the change that I just made, in that details, it will show what actually changed. And then right there, my comments added standard company alternate routing to Austin. What's new in ForeFlight Web? For our administrators, we have a new offering called Control Tower. And Control Tower for admins combines 4 unique features to increase the way you configure and create efficiencies with distributing information throughout your flight department, as well as being able to configure and tailor the use of ForeFlight Mobile. The first feature is Docs Manager, which is really an enterprise-level document management solution. So here is Docs Manager. For users that are on Control Tower, they'll see that option on the left-hand side. All of the documents you see here are powered from my cloud drive, such as Dropbox or OneDrive. With here, you'll notice right away that things are a little bit different. We have some new capabilities, such as being able to see are read receipts required for a document, and if they are my users compliant with them? Have they read all of the documents that I require read receipts? For those documents, I can require a download to make sure that all crew have all required downloads on their device. I can mark a document as required downloads and again, report on have all of my users downloaded that document or which ones have not. And lastly, I can now version documents by setting effective and expiration dates on those documents. And when I do so, that will also be shown in this enhanced compliance view at the top, and it will tell me, do some members of my crew have expired documents on board? Let me show you how it works. Diving in a little bit, let's say that I want to make this Vision flight deck document here at the bottom a required download and also give it a read receipt while setting an effective date. To do that, I'm going to click the checkbox right next to the Vision flight deck document. I'm going to click Manage on the right-hand side, and then I'm going to click Require Download. And you'll notice that the moment I do this, it automatically tells me that it has been updated, and it's now showing the table as a required document. I'm also going to go to Require Read Receipts because I want to make sure that my crew have read this document in addition to having it on board. When I click Require Read Receipts, it's going to update that as well. And now I'll have confirmation that this document is being shown to my crew as required to be downloaded to the device and that they have to read it and acknowledge that it is read. This is what it looks like to the pilot. When they are viewing this document inside of the Documents tab in ForeFlight Mobile, they'll see on the right-hand side if that's a read required document or a required download, or in this case, both. For a document that is read required, once the pilot has opened the document, they will see a confirmation bar at the top where they can confirm that they have read that document. Once the pilot has clicked Marked as Read, that confirmation will automatically feed back into the enhanced compliance view on Docs Manager that I showed before in that Read Required Items section. Going back to ForeFlight Web, I can now also set an effective date for this document so that I can better understand what documents were not only last updated, but when they came into effect, such as modifying my SOPs or my ops manuals, and to make sure that the latest and most effective document is inside of ForeFlight, and that's what my crews have access to. If I click the Edit Effective Date at the bottom of this Manage menu, I'll be presented with several options to being able to set this. I can either choose that it has an effective date and an expiration date, or choose one or the other. In this case, we're going to see the document just has an effective date. I can click Effective Date, which will present with me a calendar view from today on when this day is effective. In this case, I'm just going to click Today, which will set it to an effective date of the 13th of November, 2024. And then when I click Save, this will automatically be updated in the effective date column. Moving on to the second feature is Smart Groups. Smart Groups are a new way to be able to group together documents and users in any configuration that you want. Once you've created your Smart Groups, you can selectively share certain sets of documents to only the users that are in that same Smart Group as the documents are read. This makes it so that you can distribute different sets of documents that may only be relevant to certain pilots, just to those pilots. Let me show you how it works. So in here, we're going to click Smart Groups on the left-hand side to navigate to Smart Groups, and then click Create New Smart Group to open up the Create New Smart Group window. I'm going to give this group a name. In this case, I'm going to put Global 6000 Pilots because I'm creating a smart group that's putting all of my Global 6000 pilots together so that I can distribute the various AFMs and the various avionics AFMs to those Global 6000 pilots that's really only relevant to that particular type of aircraft. Once I've clicked Created, you'll automatically see that we now have these sections where I can add in users to the smart group, as well as add in documents to the smart group, which will automatically distribute those documents only to the users in the smart group. We're going to get started by adding in users. So I'm going to add in, by clicking Add Users on the right-hand side, only my users that are flying the Global 6000. I can either search for them by typing in their name or email address, or I can manually find them by looking through the list. Once I've selected the pilots that I want to add to this smart group, I click the Add to Smart Group button on the right-hand side, and those pilots will be added along with a visual of what role that user has inside of ForeFlight. Now let's add the Global 6000 documents. I'll tap this Go to Document Management button, which will take me back to Docs Manager. And then now I can select on the left-hand side the checkboxes for the documents that I want to add to that smart group. In this case, the G3000 AFM, the Global 6, and the Global 6000 AFM. Just like before, I'm going to go to the Manage menu at the top, select Share with Smart Group, and then select that Global 6000 Pilot Smart Group I've already created. Once I've done this, I'll click Share to Smart Group, and it will confirm that document sharing has been updated, as well as show me here in Docs Manager that those 3 documents are now being shared with the Global 6000 Pilot Smart Group. If we go back to that smart group, the view of the smart group has also updated, and we're now seeing all of those documents inside of the smart group, which makes it so that only Jane, Kevin, and Dean will be able to see the G3000 AFM, Global 6, and Global 6000 AFM documents, instead of everybody seeing those documents that may not be relevant to them. The next feature of Control Tower is Company Settings Policies, which can be accessed via the Settings tab on the left-hand side. Inside of the Settings tab, you'll first notice a new section at the bottom for security. We now offer enterprise single sign-on support for customers on Control Tower for a select set of identity providers. But right now, we're going to focus on mobile settings policies. So here, I already have an active mobile settings policy. And what mobile settings policy allows me to do is it allows me to control and tailor how ForeFlight mobile settings are being set for all pilots on my organization. So for example, if you have a particular feature that you would prefer your pilots always use or always not use, or you have a regional download that you don't want pilots to be able to download, such as you're a fixed wing operator and you don't want pilots to be able to download helicopter procedures, you can now do that and prevent the selection of helicopter procedures via mobile settings policy. To do it, I'm going to go ahead and click into the setting policy I already have active. Inside of the screen, I can give the policy a name. I can also offer a contact email to be shown inside of the ForeFlight mobile app, so if a pilot has a question, they know who to reach out to. You'll see right away that we've split up the different things that can be controlled via setting policy into features, downloads, general settings, map and miscellaneous settings, and alerts. There's also a search bar on the right-hand side to make it more powerful to easily find the setting or feature that you're wanting to change. In this case, what I want to do is I want to make sure that my pilots aren't enabling Canadian data. We have smaller iPads, and I want to make sure the space on that iPad is reserved for what really matters, which is going to be US-based procedures, as we very rarely operate in Canada. So what I'm going to do is inside of this search bar, I'm going to search for Canada. And it has automatically brought up the one setting that has a name of Canada under high resolution base map and terrain. I'm going to select that I want to control this as the admin and set it to something that is going to take effect for all users on the organization. So once I've done that, you'll notice the app behavior on the right-hand side is unlocked, where I can select what I want the behavior to be. In this case, I want to turn it off so that none of the pilots can turn on and download Canadian high-resolution base maps and terrain. Once I've done that, you'll notice on the bottom, it's automatically keeping track of the settings that I have changed, and I now have the option to save and enable a policy update. Once I click that Save and Enable button, it's going to tell me the updates have saved. And at any time, I can look and see all of the different settings that I, as an admin, am controlling for all users on my flight department by clicking that 7 settings hyperlink at the bottom. This will provide an overview of all of the settings that I am currently controlling, as well as what they're set to. So for the pilot, this is what they'll see inside of ForeFlight Mobile. They'll have the option to defer the update once, such as, hey, I'm about to run out to the airplane. I really don't have the time to be able to do this, and I'm just going to tap in later. Or this is just at a really inconvenient time in my planning process. The next time, 24 hours later, that this is brought up, they'll be forced to update. If they do click Update, inside of the view that a setting's being controlled, they'll see this little notification at the top. That settings with the lock icon are settings that are controlled by your admin, along with that contact email I mentioned earlier. If I go to the Canada selection under the high resolution base map and terrain, we'll notice this is now disabled with a lock icon. So now no pilot will be able to turn this feature on unless I, as the administrator, enable them. And there is so much more I'd love to highlight today, but unfortunately, with the time we have, those are the main features we're going to talk about for what's new in 2024. Some other great features we've released are ForeFlight tracking, additional safety alerts inside of the app, such as runway incursion alerts and wake turbulence alerts, multiple improvements to the map that's displayed inside of Dispatch, showing dispatch operational rules on a flight so you can easily reference what rules are being applied as that flight is being created, helicopter airways for helicopter operators, and showing headwinds and tailwinds, as well as ground speeds in profile view. Thank you so much for your time today and for joining us.
Thank you, Alex. Now let's move into our Q&A session. Simpson, the first question is going to be for you. How is the integration with scheduling software like trip planning?
Yeah, so we have an extensive list of scheduling providers that we work with. It's available on our website. If you go to ba.foreflight.com, that's where we have not only the products that Alex has kind of highlighted today, a little bit more in depth and some of the capabilities that we sell highlighted, but we also have our integrations tab. So we talk about a couple of different integration options that we have, whether it's through an SMS provider or if you have a scheduling tool that you use that you want to be feeding into Dispatch. All of that information is shared on our website. Additionally, I know we've had a number of questions come in about future functionality to various products and tools. That also is communicated through our website. So we have a feature dash releases section on that website that will kind of cover all of the different capabilities that we've released in a given time period. So it's also filterable. So if you have questions about runway analysis or our new trip support or something to that effect, that can be filtered out on that page specifically.
Exactly. And you can always check, as Simpson said, ba.foreflight.com for the latest information. Alex, question for you. How does Sentry communicate in flight? And tell us a little bit about that process.
Thanks, Keith. That's a great question. So for the reported turbulence feature that I'm assuming this question is about, the Sentry isn't able to communicate or update turbulence reports in flight unless it has an internet connection. So if you don't have onboard internet, such as GoGo or Starlink, then the turbulence reports are only going to upload back to the network and be visible to other users who have the reported turbulence feature once the aircraft is back on the ground and you're connecting your device to the internet again.
Thank you. Simpson, next question is for you. To see international services on the services tab, do you have to have Jeppesen for your international trip planning?
Great question. So the services tab is actually populated through ForeFlight Trip Support, which is actually a service that we launched in May of this year that is powered by the Jeppesen team. So the Jeppesen team, flight planning team that's got an extensive experience and infrastructure for international trip planning and also some other trip planning, not just necessarily internationally, but that ForeFlight Trip Support team feeds statuses of your maybe slot arrangements, overflight permits, catering services, ground handling. They actually will populate that tab in ForeFlight Mobile to keep your pilots communicated and up to date on the latest service and the status and everything like that. So it basically removes the requirement of sending in an email or phoning the trip planning and trip support team. It will surface, the services and the statuses of that service right in there. So when they arrive on the ramp, they will, have that confirmation code on whatever the service is. So if there's ever a question or anything like that, it saves them that phone call. So that is facilitated through ForeFlight Trip Support. So that is how that services tab is populated.
Thanks for that insight. And Alex, a question for you about weight and balance that came in earlier in the webinar. Can the weight and balance be emailed, for example, to a dispatcher or a scheduler? And tell us a little bit more about some of those sharing options.
Yeah, so you can email the weight and balance summary sheet to a dispatcher, scheduler, or somebody else. To do that, you'll want to go to weight and balance either inside of flights or the weight and balance tab. Click summary at the top to generate that summary sheet. And then if you click the little send to icon, that's kind of a square box with an arrow pointing on top of it. That's going to allow you to send that to using whatever email app that you have on your iPad or your iPhone to somebody like a dispatcher or a scheduler. However, if you have ForeFlight Dispatch, the weight and balance does automatically sync back to dispatch with that flight so that the dispatcher or the scheduler would be able to go in, look at that weight and balance, look at the completed weight and balance at any time, and that is archived with that flight inside of dispatch, which is just another way that ForeFlight is keeping the entire flight department connected and in sync.
Excellent. And for Simpson, how do you access services for international trip, and can those only be updated with JEP trip planning, or does any other service provider kind of plug into the ForeFlight dispatch environment?
Yeah, so great question. Kind of building on the previous one, that is access that is provided just to ForeFlight trip support. Um, so you don't necessarily need to have a ForeFlight account or anything along those lines. You can actually use ForeFlight trip support without being a dispatch or mobile customer. Though the true benefits of being part of the ForeFlight ecosystem is realized when you have all of those components together. And like I was kind of alluding to before, when you have a ForeFlight trip support contract set up in place, and I think there may have been some questions about pricing and how to get that all set up, but that can be handled through sales, and I believe we could provide that with you as far as how to contact sales. That is, of course, available on our website. You can go through and they have forms on there and more information about our trip support feature there. But the benefit of having ForeFlight and being a part of the ForeFlight ecosystem is that with trip support, with ForeFlight Mobile, and soon with web and dispatch, you'll be able to see all of the services that are booked on behalf of you as the operator. And you, like I said, you don't have to call. Of course, there is a dedicated phone number. If there's some issues that pop up, if there's something that is not planned that needs to be addressed, you of course have a dedicated phone line to reach out to the trip support team and to talk to a specific planner or talk to the planning team. But if you have a simple question that can be solved with what is the confirmation number? Has this service been set up for us? That can all be answered through both ForeFlight Mobile and eventually the web and dispatch. So right now it's just for the ForeFlight trip support team, and that's where they're going to be populating that information. It's not going to be extended out to others.
Thank you. And building off of another question for you, Alex, will turbulence reports be viewable for others without a Sentry device?
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you to whoever asked that one. So, yes, you can view turbulence reports even if you're not flying with a Sentry device, so long as you have purchased the reported turbulence add-on. So, if that is something you're interested in, make sure to contact your sales representative for pricing information. We love to see users using Sentry devices and contributing to that network. So, it is not required, but it is something that is highly encouraged. But you will be able to get those turbulence reports without using a Sentry.
Simpson and Alex, thank you again for sharing your insights into everything that we've been working on in ForeFlight behind the scenes. We're about ready to close out this webinar. I wanted to ask you if there's any last questions or remarks that you would like to share with those on the call.
So I'll go first. I think the most important thing is, we regularly try to communicate a number of different, capabilities and new products throughout. Of course, being from the marketing side, I want to let everybody know that we have some great features and capabilities lined up for 2025. And our website is a great resource to find a lot of that information and making sure that you're always up to date on the latest that one of our products have, whether it's Runway Analysis, trip support or our weight and balance, those fundamental kind of tools and products that are on there. So Alex and the team do a great job of rolling out incredible features and products for the industry. And me as marketing, of course, it helps to get the word out. So our ba.foreflight.com is a great resource for any questions that you may have. Or if you see something on there that doesn't answer your question, there's some great resources there to get that question answered. So that would be my only parting gift, is that our website is a great resource for questions and further information about our products.
Well, thanks, Simpson. I appreciate the kind words. Thanks for engaging with us all today. We appreciate all of the fantastic questions and your time. That's all I have for today.
Excellent. Again, I want to thank Alex and Simpson for sharing their insight, as well as to the ForeFlight staff that's working behind the scenes to bring this question, or excuse me, to bring this webinar to life and answer some of the written questions that came in. And lastly, I want to thank you for joining today's webinar. This webinar has been recorded and it will be available on our website and YouTube channel within 24 hours. If your question did not get answered in today's webinar, you can see more resources available on our website at ba.foreflight.com, and you can always email us at info@foreflight.com. Thank you so much, everyone.